Well, good evening, everybody. This is Zach Foster. I am one half of the dynamic duo known as Latin Libertarians. My partner in crime, Martha, is not able to join us tonight, which is why, unfortunately, we're not doing the episode on governments infiltrating libertarian movements this week. However, we do have something special that a lot of you folks might appreciate. And personally, I had such a fun time researching this to be able to present and comment on this to you guys. We are going to be covering Murray Newton Rothbard. But from what angle? Well, for starters, let me introduce the man. He was a professor of economics at Columbia University. He was very active in the New York libertarian intellectual scene. He was present first when there was a feud between Ayn Rand and Ludwig von Mises, and later when Ayn Rand unfortunately extended the feud against all libertarians. All kinds of silliness, all kinds of zaniness. But Murray Rothbard, apart from being a prolific author, many of whose works have inspired our activism and our Austrian economic worldview as libertarians, or perhaps it's informed other people's anarchist worldview or minarchist worldview. When you read Murray Rothbard, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, he writes with such an emotional intensity and with such a passion for human freedom that it really does punch you in the gut. So, the angle that we're going to be covering tonight, as far as Murray Newton Rothbard goes, is not so much his prolific writings, but his activism, and specifically his involvement with the growing American Libertarian movement and the newly founded United States Libertarian Party. A lot of this gossip comes from Rothbard's own words, which was preserved for us, archived, and reprinted by the Ludwig von Mises Institute. Actually, I'm going to call them for the rest of the night the Ludwig von Hell Yeah Institute down in Auburn, Alabama. They took all the old issues of this libertarian newspaper that Rothbard edited and wrote many articles for. It was called First the Libertarian, then the name evolved to the Libertarian Forum. But this newsletter went on for 15 years, and in this, Rothbard chronicles the rise of American libertarianism in that era well into the 1980s. Incredibly exciting stuff. And also, I'm just going to give you guys some fair warning. I do admire him, and I'm coming from this from an angle of admiration, but also an angle to analyze. Murray Rothbard was one of the gossipiest dudes in the entire libertarian movement, period. And every one of these bookmarks that I've got in this beautiful, beautiful tome published by the Ludwig von Hell Yeah Institute is Murray Rothbard critiquing the growth of the American libertarian movement as he saw it. And a lot of it is very positive stuff. Just to give you guys some context about where the libertarian movement used to be, I'm going to show you an issue from the Libertarian from 1969, June 1st, 1969. The article is called The Movement Grows, and I'm just going to read you a quick snippet. So, writing about the libertarian movement in 1969, Rothbard said, until this year, the libertarian movement was pitifully small and beleaguered, and any talk of any sort of libertarian organization or even occasional meetings was hopelessly utopian. But now the movement has been escalating with extraordinary rapidity. In the old days, there would be one new convert a year, and he would be worked on with painful slowness before his conversion could be complete. But now we keep running into kids, some college freshmen, who are not only libertarians, but full-fledged and self-converted with the correct line on everything, from competing private defense agencies to private property rights to war revision to alliance with the New Left. It has all been very gratifying. Now get this. Compare the state of the movement now in 1969, say, to that 1 year ago. The New York movement contained about half a dozen people. Now, for the first time in living memory, so in Rothbard's living memory, it is escalated to far beyond the capacity of one person's living room. It has escalated to far beyond the capacity of one person's living room. It's clear as day right there. Between 1968 and 1969, the American Libertarian movement was effectively enough people to fit in one person's living room. And then the movement was growing, but the movement was having some growing pains. This is an absolutely exquisite piece that I came across from an issue from November 1969 called The Conference. Since there were so many new libertarians in the year 1969, Rothbard and Walter Block and some of the other libertarian folks active in New York and that area were hell-bent on having a conference. If we got all these new libertarians, why don't we have a conference? Which that makes me extremely glad to have seen Walter Block come back to the party in recent years. I have seen Walter Block in different state conventions, speaking and whatnot. He's a very good guy. He said some very supportive statements on the libertarians down in Cuba and Venezuela. And perhaps Mr. Anarcho-Capitalist doesn't want to put a big spotlight on this, but Walter Block was also active with the American Libertarian activists in the New York scene, even though he's Canadian. So that's really cool. That's a nice piece of international history, international fusion in our own libertarian movement. A Canadian was helpful in the foundation of the American Libertarian Party way back when. That's really awesome. So they had the first New York Libertarian Conference. And it says right here, Rothbard's own words, the first New York Libertarian Conference is over. It was a wild and woolly time, both exciting and dull, wonderful and shambles. It was great that we held it, but it is highly doubtful that another conference will ever be held in the same form. To quote Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. So let's jump straight to when the anarchists tried to storm Fort Dix. Yes, you heard me correctly. So phase one of the article talks about all the things that went right. Rothbard delivered a splendid paper on a Saturday night. Some other folks delivered splendid papers and talks on Saturday morning. That was phase one. They were very excited that different groups of libertarians and anarchists from the right and anarchists from the left had come from all over the country to do libertarian. Forgive the sound of the police state. Please remember I live in the very active, very alive city of Los Angeles, but it will pass in just a moment. So in phase two, disintegration, he talks about when the super radicals came, because Rothbard always considered himself a radical. So the folks that came were super radicals, if not nihilistic. If polarization and cultural hogwash was one measure of the disintegration during phase two of the conference, which was in November 1969, another was the sudden emergency of a typically ultra-left call for immediate action, virtually any action against the state. The cry was first raised on Saturday night when one ultra-leftist in the audience raised the call, "On to Fort Dix!" This referred to a new left action against Fort Dix, New Jersey that had been planned for Sunday. Theoretically, it was supposed to involve merely a demonstration at the fort on behalf of various military prisoners and in opposition to the war. But it was also rumored that an attempt would be made to march onto the fort itself. While there is nothing morally wrong, of course, with the idea of people invading an army fort, quite the contrary, there is vast gulf between the moral correctness and strategic and tactical wisdom of such an action. Folks, don't do that today. It's much better to get yourself elected to a federal office where you could slash the budget and then just close up Fort Dix or sell it off to private developers, which happens to old military bases all the time. Please, folks, don't go charging any military base. Nothing could be achieved by such an invasion, certainly not a successful capture, and the only thing that could possibly be accomplished would be to be gassed and or bayoneted and or clubbed and or shot, plus a possible 10 years in jail for literally stepping on the grass of army property. And then what happened? The sudden onrush. Oh, that's right. So a lot of people did get gassed. They did get, some folks did get arrested. Some folks did get clubbed because, of course, they were going to send the MPs to stop people from invading the base. And then the people, the majority that did not get arrested at this event, they went back to the conference in New York City, which that's one hell of a drive to be going straight from New York City into New Jersey and then back into the city. I guess they had way less congestion 50 years ago than they did today. Anyhow, it reached the monstrous point that the entire center was willing to call off the whole Sunday daytime proceedings of a convention for which they had lovingly prepared for many months, in order to rush off in a delirium to embrace the receiving end of the tear gas canister and the bayonet, anarcho-martyrism rearing its ugly head. That is exactly what happened, by the way. This was absolutely incredible. Anyway, the folks who didn't get arrested came back to the conference and were shouting and screaming at everybody on the floor about how everybody who didn't go to Fort Dix was a traitor and a sellout, and they weren't really trying to fight for anarchism or freedom. It was something else. Now we're going to jump to May of 1972. So at this point, the Libertarian Party has existed for 6 months. And then right here, Mr. Rothbard is saying in 1972, now mind you, this is not going to be very positive, but we're embracing this from a historical context because this is a criticism of somebody who was active in the party for a long time, all right? Also, we can have a thick skin because, I mean, come on. Every time we log on to social media, one of our capital L libertarian friends seems to be complaining about the Libertarian Party not going specifically the way they like. So let's get a look at what this looked like back in 1972. Mr. David F. Nolan, temporary national chairman of the Libertarian Party, writes in high dudgeon that while it is true that the party had only 52 activist members last November, that it now, as of March 24th, has nearly 350 members and 6 state chairmen. Anyone who thinks that this makes any difference for the viability of a nationwide party is welcome to reevaluate our position. 52 activist members to 350 members, and Rothbard is complaining you cannot have a national party with 350 members. Well, that's true. It was also the very first 6 months of the party. That's also not even an issue anymore because just dues paying members is in the tens of thousands. With the tens of thousands of dues paying members, some more tens of thousands of activists who usually only like to get involved and volunteer and do stuff really close to actual election cycles. And then folks who leave the party and come back to the party and leave the party again and come back to the party over several years. It's one of those realities that we deal with. But 350 people and that's the entire national party. That's no longer an issue. But coming from that position to see that long ago, first in 1969, they were super excited that they had more than one living room's worth of people. And then in 1972, he's complaining that we only have 350 members. Good Lord. I wish that we had been able to recruit 350 regular activists just into the Hispanic Libertarian Caucus. These things take time to build, but also it's humbling that 350 party members, it's just not a problem anymore. It's just not a problem anymore. And for that, I am absolutely grateful. Now, that was he wrote this in March. It was published in May of 1972. Now we're going to go just a few months later, okay? We're going to see what the same Murray Rothbard is saying about the Libertarian Party just a few months later in the summer of 1972. Now, mind you, at this time, the Vietnam War was still raging. The Easter Offensive would have just ended, which the South Vietnamese Army won with the help of a lot of American intervention. Unfortunately, it did not prevent the inevitable. It only prolonged it. But a lot of the Republicans, they were still backing Nixon. Also, we know that just the year before, Nixon's government had officially abandoned the gold standard. For all of us, it wasn't something that Mr. Nixon did just for himself and his friends, but he took the gold standard away from all of us. This is the operating environment for the Libertarian Party back in 1972. So, in The Party Emerges, now I want you guys to listen to the tune that Rothbard is singing. From all sides, I have been bombarded with the question, have I sold out to the newly emerged Libertarian Party? Or to put it less violently, have I shifted my position? It is true that I have agreed to become an economic advisor to John Hospers, the Libertarian Party candidate for the presidency, and that I have joined an academic advisory board for the New York Party called the Free Libertarian Party. That is true. There was some strange lawsuit where there was a liberal party or a liberty party in New York, and because those guys were claiming, I guess, the majority of the word, or those guys were claiming the root word of liberty. They made the New York Party change their name, so they added the word free in front of Libertarian Party. So if you ever see an old button that says Free Libertarian Party, which is a collectible item, that was the New York LP back then. But I have not changed my position in the least. My strictures against the LP were not the result of anti-party principle. I never believed that forming a political party itself violates libertarian principle. Okay, so just a couple of months before, he's talking a bunch of smack about, you can't have a party with 350 people. This is a joke. It's not worth our time. We're going to have to stick with the viable parties, blah, 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 blah. Just a couple of months later, well, it's true that I'm an economic advisor to that party I don't like's candidate who's running for president. And it's true that I'm very impressed. And I've also been active with the New York Libertarian Party, but no, I haven't changed my position. Well, let's let him explain that. My arguments against the national ticket were strategic and prudential, and these arguments still remain. But you're still the economic advisor to that national ticket, Marie. I mean, okay. Well, he voted with his feet. He can say whatever he wants because he voted with his feet. Let's see what else he says. I wish it well, but realistically, I do not expect much, either by way of votes or of mass conversion, to emerge from the campaign. I remain furthermore more enthusiastic about campaigns on the local level at this stage of the game. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. The New York FLP is pursuing this kind of strategy by concentrating its energies on two local races in Manhattan. Gary Greenberg for Congress and Forum contributor Walter Block for Assembly. Walter Block running for state assembly on the LP ticket. New York LP. Are you New York LP? Yo, you guys are on deck. Get Walter Block to run for assembly again for the LP. There you go. You guys got homework. All the other 49 state parties, plus DC and Puerto Rico, are looking at you right now, New York LP. Get Walter Block to run for assembly again. See, you guys can see, obviously, I was like a kid in a candy store doing the research for this episode. And on the one on the loosely affiliated Independence Rights ticket with Guy W. Riggs for assembly from Poughkeepsie. All right, so there we go. He's not keeping it exclusively to the LP, but other folks who are very close to our beliefs who want to run on independent tickets, he's making it clear they're not our enemy. If they are doing our work, or if they're talking about our issues and they're just, there's one guy doing an independent ticket, that's fine. That's totally fine. Only thing that I ask as a courtesy is that folks running on independent tickets would not run against a libertarian in a district, because at that point you're splitting the libertarian vote rather than helping. However, I mean, I've done volunteer work for independent small L libertarians who paid dues as capital L libertarians, but they had their own private disagreements with the LP at the time, which made them not want to be candidates on the capital L ticket, which I also disagree with. But hey, as long as these guys are, again, preaching our issues, running for office, and they're still giving our organization their money, like, I'm not going to complain. Because at the end of the day, obviously, Rothbard voted with his feet, and he got involved with this party that's totally not viable. I guess he believed that it must have had some potential. There are several imaginative ways by which Greenberg and Block are going beyond the rather stodgy laissez-faire platform of the official party. In the first place, Greenberg and Block go beyond the official party call for total amnesty for draft resistors and advocate reparations to be paid out of the pockets of the politicians and personnel who maintained the draft. Ouch, that guy's serious. That guy's totally serious. Furthermore, if the draft is slavery and is criminal, then shouldn't the criminals be forced to compensate the victim? Here is radical libertarian doctrine, not to be found in the orthodox political guidebooks of objectivism. Shots fired. Greenberg and Block go on from there to another joyously radical demand. A war crimes tribunal should be established to examine whether or not war crimes have been committed during the Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon administrations. Wow. And that article goes on to talk about other types of activism that he is impressed with. But what I want you guys specifically to take away from that is the lesson that even though he still disagreed with the idea of a national ticket, at least in principle, he voted with his feet. He came to help out. He didn't just, tweet advice. He actually got on John Hosper's team. He actually got on the advisory board for the New York Party. And then in his newsletter, he is promoting the candidacies of Big L and Small L libertarians. And I think that is absolutely incredible. So, what is he writing the following year in November of 1973? By this time, most of the troops have come home from Vietnam. John McCain did his thing, shook Richard Nixon's hand on the tarmac. In another article titled Libertarian Party from the November 1973 issue of Libertarian Forum, he says, the elections of 1973 have come and gone, and the major result, from our point of view, has been the establishment of the Libertarian Party and the Free Libertarian Party of New York in particular as the central organizational force in the libertarian movement. And not only that, the fledgling FLP has now become a force to reckon with in New York politics. Has now become a force to reckon with in New York politics. I think that is absolutely beautiful. Let me turn on my portable light real quick so that you guys are able to see me. Usually I've got my fantabulous partner in crime texting me stuff in the chat, but she is doing other duties this evening. Ooh, not that bright. Good Lord. Let's get back to normal light so that we can shed light not on me, but upon the words of Murray Rothbard. The FLP campaign of Fran Youngstein for mayor provided a central focus for libertarians throughout the country. Libertarians all across the nation, even those with grave philosophical qualms about political activity, poured contributions into the Youngstein campaign and enabled Fran and the FLP to gain an enormous amount of publicity and favorable recognition, and even endorsements from TV, radio, the press, columnists, and the public at large. Fran received approximately 9,000 votes for mayor, far more than any minor party has received in New York City in many years, and FLP's Gary Greenberg, as the only candidate running for district attorney of Manhattan against the gravely ailing Frank Hogan, polled over 8,200 votes, approximately 4% of the total votes. Not only that, the FLP campaign has gained libertarianism a powerful recognition factor among New York City voters, so that a remarkable number of men in the street, while scarcely converted, knew instantly who we were and roughly what we stood for. That's pretty cool. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to where he says, a word should be said here about the remarkable personal qualities which enabled Fran Youngstein, a political neophyte, to hold down a highly responsible and demanding job at IBM while still waging a notably vigorous and energetic campaign. Such intelligent and tireless dedication to the cause deserves the heartfelt gratitude of every libertarian. Good job, Fran Youngstein, wherever you are. The FLP has high hopes. Presumably, it has plans now to take advantage of the momentum achieved by its electric burst into New York City politics by running a full-scale ticket for governor and senator in 1974. For this, it will need more manpower and more support by libertarians throughout the country. So even back then, the message changed. Now, he gives us a little bit of a challenge, even though he doesn't put it in those words. He is bragging about a libertarian candidate getting 4% of the vote in New York City, which for a party still within its first 2 years, its infancy, and having almost no name recognition just 1 year before that, yeah, 4% is a really impressive accomplishment. However, this is a party that is elected over 150 mayors, city council members, and other local officials. It has elected multiple state representatives in different legislatures at different points over the last 25 years, and hasn't just happened once or twice. We have elected people to office before, so that is a challenge for those of us today. And instead of grumbling about it, we got to just step up. And by the way, if anybody wants to get involved with Latin Libertarian, with the Hispanic Libertarian Caucus up there in New York City or New York State, just reach out to myself or Martha directly. Now, let's go to a little bit more dramatic gossip. Let's see. Let's go to volume 2. We're going to go to some of the later years because some of you guys might be thinking, but Murray Rothbard left the Libertarian Party later on. Well, we'll get to that later. LP election scoreboard, January 1977. Again, we have happy, excited Murray Rothbard. The election returns issue of LP News from November-December 1976 has now been published. The issue includes McBride returns from each state and, with the help of the official election returns, e.g. in World Almanac 1977, we are now able to present and analyze how well each ticket did in each state. So let's see here. All votes in millions, 51.6. Okay, gotcha. So how many votes did he get in each state? Because there's a big old chart here. Okay, so out of every, what does that believe? Oh, percentage-wise, gotcha. Okay, so the McBride vote by state, Alabama got 1.16%, which was a little over 1,400 votes. Alaska, 0.62%. Arizona, 0.73%. California in 1976, apparently he got 7.6%. Wow. 7.6 in California. Where else did we do really well? Michigan, 3.62. Ohio 4.06. We have other states like Rhode Island 0.39, Tennessee 1.46, Utah 0.5. So these other states like Wisconsin in the twos, Ohio in the fours. These are elections in which the Libertarian candidate did surprisingly well. Now it's still 1 to 4%. We have done better than that. We have done better than that before. We can do better than that again. The most important part here is that despite his criticisms, Rothbard was still highly active. This book is absolutely incredible. We are running out of time because I want to make a comment. Some folks might be talking in the comments about what about Rothbard ending up with the right? Because in the 60s, Rothbard was very active with the left. He was heavily pursuing a strategy at the time of allying with the New Left, which I did not think was a mistake. There were certain sections of the New Left that absolutely would have made fabulous, if not converts, then allies for the Libertarian movement. Rothbard had mixed feelings about the Black Panther Party, for example. He loved that they were doing what they were doing as far as, doing their own patrols in their own neighborhoods, carrying their weapons out in public places, just protecting and defending and practicing the Second Amendment right in every neighborhood that they were in, and how that absolutely drove the agents of the state crazy. He liked that. He liked that they were actively fighting for local autonomy, trying to reduce police presence in their neighborhoods, and the fact that they were doing excellent community volunteer work, like their community kitchens, where many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of young poor children were able to get a good balanced breakfast before school in the morning. This is before the school lunch programs that a lot of people take for granted and a lot of us think can be privatized. Yeah, sure, they can be privatized, but if you're running for office, instead of just saying it should be privatized, what is your plan for privatizing a government subsidized school lunch program so that it's paid for in the private sector without affecting the quality? It can be done, but those are not answers necessarily that a lot of people had back in the 60s, which is why so many folks in that movement, it's one reason why so many folks in that movement were open to Marxism. And frankly, because the American Libertarian movement was so new at the time, if they had just come up, with a way to market what Martha and I do on the show by telling people, listen, we're not going to go around banging the racism drum. It's just saying this is racist, that person's racist, that policy's racist. It's not productive. When something is racist, yes, sure, call it out. If there are more productive ways to message, let's say, to a more sensitive audience, we got to use that, because at the end of the day, the onus is on us as communicators. And as far as the Black liberation movement in the 1960s, which Rothbard was at very first very enamored with, remember in the 1960s, Rothbard was straight up saying that the Viet Cong are right, even though we know now with the benefit of hindsight that they absolutely were fighting to instill a Stalinist government in their country that was ruled by Hanoi. Things like that are what disillusioned Rothbard from working with the New Left. There's also a rumor that at one particular Black Panther Party meeting, he was trying to recruit some people to the libertarian philosophy, and he got a pistol in his back. I have not seen any evidence of this. I have only heard rumors, including from folks who have been at different Mises seminars. If anybody from the Mises Institute or in the Mises Caucus with the answer to that could get in touch with me, that would be incredibly helpful. However, Rothbard lost confidence in the left. However, the fact that he was willing to work with folks who were openly supporting socialist revolution in the United States means that at the end of the day, the most important thing for Rothbard was anybody fighting against the state. And so in the 1980s, he got involved with folks in the New Right, just like he was willing to kind of tolerate for a while the Marxism that was inherent in organizations like the Black Panther Party and the SDS, which he wrote about at length in the early years of the Libertarian Forum, which you can find on Volume 1. I got these exquisite editions on sale from the Mises Institute, but these are ebooks. You can download these as PDF files on Mises.org. So he got involved with folks in the 80s who were willing to fight against the state. His priority was fighting against the state and not necessarily what the intentions are of those people who are fighting against the state. I am someone who considers myself to be a student of Rothbard. I completely agree with Rothbard's advice. Don't just go storming Fort Dix. You're just going to get yourself hurt or arrested, and there are peaceful and more productive ways to do what you're trying to do in this country. However, where I would differ from him is that if people can jive with the non-aggression axiom, if they can live up to that principle, whether they consider themselves to be libertarian or not, I can work with those people. That's why, despite having embraced the right, the far right, including some elements of the far right, he himself was not far right, but he was willing to flirt with them. That's because his priorities were anybody who's fighting the state. That's also why, just a couple of months before his death in 1995, I believe it was the spring of 1994, in the Rockwell Rothbard report, Rothbard wrote glowing praise about the Zapatista National Liberation Army. And he talked about, yes, they are Marxist. And these are the reasons why they have Marxist philosophy as their ideology. However, their beef against the Mexican government is based on private property rights, which was true because the Mexican government kept nationalizing and then giving away to its cronies land that the indigenous people had had charters to. And unfortunately, there was no libertarian to give them a private property based, freedom based, individual rights based argument. All they had was Che Guevara and we got to fight the landlords and do revolution. But he even wrote glowing praise about them in the 1990s, even after having flirted with David Duke and other groups, which I personally consider to be absolutely repugnant. We do things a little bit differently today. I do not manifest myself as radically as Murray Rothbard does. I am a communicator. I was trained in military journalism when I still used to believe in all that stuff in my old lifetime. I have a much more tactically wise approach to the whole thing, in my opinion. Um, and while I can appreciate that people are fighting to reduce government power and reduce government presence in our lives, somebody is going to eventually step in and fill the vacuum. When the Russian state was overthrown in 1917, what came in and filled that vacuum at first looked promising, but by the time October or November, based on your calendar, came around, and the Bolsheviks came and took control of everything, it all went to hell. It all went to hell. And that's why you had folks like John Reed were shilling for the Bolshevik Revolution, executing people, whereas other socialists like Emma Goldman, they had intellectual honesty. I will always have respect for Emma Goldman for saying this, these firing squads and the hostages and executing people 24/7. This is not what it was supposed to be. I refuse to take part in this. I refuse to take any part in this or support this or say that this is good and okay. I will always respect Emma Goldman for that, even though I disagree with most of the stuff that she wrote. So people's intentions are super important to me. That is why I personally am totally unsympathetic to the whines and the cries and the protests of people who were involved with that action on January 6th. Sorry, but those folks did not have the best intentions. They were not fighting for freedom. They were not fighting to bring our troops home from 100 and plus countries. They were not fighting to systematically end police brutality in one clean sweep. They were not going to bring back the gold standard. They were just going to make one guy president forever. You can try to tell me that didn't happen. Sorry, man. I had a lot of friends. I dated people from well, I'm not going to name those organizations, but a lot of organizations that were involved in the Ron Paul movement about a decade ago, they were there. People that I know were there that day. They did not have the best intentions, even though they thought they did. So I will continue fighting against government power, but fighting against government power at all forms. I am not just thinking about the US government. I am also thinking about what's going to happen to the US government or what will happen with the US government wielded as a weapon if people like Kamala become president or if Donald Trump runs for the presidency again and gets elected, God forbid. I'm not just worried about the creeps who have power right now. I'm also worried about all the other creeps who want power and are masquerading behind freedom terminology. Anyway, I have gone over the time that I was supposed to go over tonight. I had a lot of fun talking about Murray Rothbard, the libertarian activist, with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please follow Bueno for Miami on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. _Zach, ZACH. _Foster, or you could find me on Instagram under Libertario del Norte. That is all for tonight. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Latin Libertarians, and provided everything goes according to plan, Martha and I will be together again next week, and we will give you guys that episode that you've been waiting for on governments and government stooges trying to infiltrate libertarian parties and libertarian movements. Thank you very much. You guys have a great night, and long live human freedom all over the world. Thank you.